answers. If you plug this in your calculator, it's going to give you a decimal, and I'm going to count it wrong. When I say 2 cosine of 30 degrees, this means 2 times the cosine of 30. So, hold in my 30. Cosine is the square root of the bottom over 2. How many fingers are below my 30? 3. So it's 2 times the square root of 3 over 2, which gives us the square root of 3. B. Tangent of 45 plus the tangent of 60 squared. So, fold in my 45. Tangent of 45, so the square root of the top over square root of the bottom. Radical 2 over radical 2 is 1. Tangent of 60, so if you fold in your 60, square root of the top over the square root of the bottom is Okay, how do you square something like that? FOIL. So it means we have 2 of them. So that gives me 1 plus radical 3 plus radical 3, so plus 2 radical 3, plus the square root of 9, which is 3. So we get 4 plus 2 radical 3. The last one. Sine squared of 45 means you take the sine of 45 degrees and square that value. So 45 degrees, hold in your 45. Sine is the square root of the top over 2. So that is square root of 2 over 2. Minus 2 times the sine of 45 degrees, we just said, square root of 2 divided by 2. Times the cosine of 45 degrees. So cosine is the square root of the bottom over 2, which is plus the cosine of 45 squared, and we just said the cosine of 45 is radical 2 over 2. Alright, so if I work this out, radical 2 squared would be 2 over 2 squared is 4. So that's a 1/2. And then this 2. If I multiply those, I get the square root of 4, so 2 over 4. So we get 1/2 minus 1 plus 1/2, which is 0. On a problem like that, I'm expecting to see that work. I want to see that you know what sine and cosine of 45 degrees are. You subbed in the correct value and then worked it out. Are there any questions on those? Then, the last couple. So we're going to do this one first. Alright. So in this, I want to find the values of each variable. So we'll start over here. When I'm looking at this problem, my variables, I have A, B, C, and D that we have to solve for. The trig functions require what kind of triangle? A right triangle. Okay, so if I start, how many right triangles are in my picture? 2. Now this first triangle on the left, I don't know any of the sides, they're all variables, so I'm not going to start there. I'm going to start with this triangle on the right. If I say exact value, that means use radicals, no decimals. So, if I want to solve for b, for instance, we can use a trig function. We We know this is 30 degrees. 12 is my hypotenuse. From my 30-degree angle, B is opposite. What trig function is opposite and involves opposite and hypotenuse? The other sine. Sine is opposite of hypotenuse. Now, you could do cosine if you found out that's 60 degrees and use that. So we could definitely get there. So if I'm using my 30-degree angle, I could say the sine of 30 degrees is my opposite side, B, over my hypotenuse, 12. Opposite over adjacent. And then we use our hand trick. So sine of 30 degrees. If I fold in my 30 degrees, sine is the square root of the top over 2. So square root of 1 over 2 is 1/2. So if I multiply by 12, B is 6. Let's stick in that triangle and let's find D. So if I wanted to find D, I could use side B that I just found, but I prefer, if at all possible, to use the ones that were given. So if I wanted to use my 12 and my D for my 30-degree angle, D is adjacent, 12 is hypotenuse. What trig function involves adjacent and hypotenuse? So I could say the cosine of 30 degrees equals the adjacent side D. The hypotenuse 12. Alright, hand trick. Cosine of 30 degrees. So square root of the bottom over 2. Radical 3 over 2. Multiply over 12. D is 6 radical 3. Alright. Now we need to find A and C. Do you guys know what either of those would be without solving it? Let's go ahead and work with it. This would have to be a right angle as well. I know side D we just found. That's 6 radical 3. So from 45, if I wanted to find A is adjacent. 6 radical 3 is opposite. What trig function involves opposite and adjacent? So I could say the tangent of 45 degrees equals my opposite side, 6 radical 3, over my adjacent side, A. Okay, tangent of 45. Fold in your 45. Tangent square root of the top over square root of the bottom, so radical 2 over radical 2 is 1. If you multiply A over, it is 6 radical 3. You might have been able to get that without working it out, just because if this angle is 45, this angle also has to be 45, which means it's an isosceles triangle. So if you caught that, you could just write down the A without showing me work. But if not, we worked it out and got there. You also have the option, I'm using trig functions for all of these. You could, once you have 2 sides of a triangle, how could you find the third one? Think back before you knew these trig functions. A day ago, when we had 2 sides of a triangle, what did we do to find the third one? Pythagorean theorem. So that's certainly still an option. But I'm going to go ahead and just practice my trig functions, so I'll keep going with this. So the last one we have left is C. C is the hypotenuse. If I wanted to use the 6 radical 3 in hypotenuse, so from my 45, that would be, 6 radical 3 is opposite over hypotenuse, so that would be sine. Sine of 45 degrees equals my opposite, 6 radical 3 over my hypotenuse, C. So sine of 45, fold in, it's radical 2 over 2. This one is a little bit uglier, but we could cross multiply. So we get C radical 2 divide by the square root of 2. Can we leave a radical on the bottom? No, so if you multiply by radical 2 on top and bottom, that's 2 radical 6 over 2, or 6 radical 6. So there is not just one correct way of getting these. We could have done Pythagorean theorem there, we could have done a different trig function depending on which sides we pick and which angles. Is that one okay? Final example of the day. I think I did leave off the right angle symbol on this, so you do need one here as well for this to work. So if I want the exact value, we do have this triangle where we were given a side in it. Is there anything that we would know without having to work it out? P would also be 15 because it's a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Those legs are the same. If you didn't want to do a trig function, what could you do to find R at this point? Not the only option, but we can do it. When you square root, normally plus or minus, but we're only dealing with positives here. 450 we can break into 225 and 2. So the square root of 225 is 15. So 15 radical 2. Alright, do we have an option to do Pythagorean theorem to find the other sides? Not until we get at least one of them. So we have to do a trig function. So from here, this is my 30. We just found R. So that's my adjacent. If I want to find Q, that's opposite. What trig function involves opposite and adjacent? So I could say the tangent of 30 equals Q over 15 radical 2. What is the tangent of 30 degrees? It's radical 1 over radical 3, right? So it would turn into radical 3 over 3 because it's top over bottom. So if we cross multiply 3Q equals 15 radical 6, divide by 3 and we get 5 radical 6. And then, how do you want to find T? We could do Pythagorean theorem, and that would work. T is the hypotenuse. So if you do that, it's 15 radical 2 squared plus 5 radical 6 squared equals T squared. I tend to see a lot of mistakes when people start squaring with these. So let me just kind of talk about what this means. When you see 15 radical 2 squared, it means you have to square the 15 and you square the radical 2. So 15 squared is 225, radical 2 squared is 2, and you multiply those. So it's 225 times 2, so that's 450. This means 5 squared and the square root is 6 squared. So 25 times 6. So T squared equals 600. Get rid of the square root. You could break that into 106. Thank you so much. Did you? Okay. And square root of 100 is 10. So we get 10 radical 6. So on these problems, you are free to use different strategies. You could do different trig functions. Once you have two sides, you can do Pythagorean theorem, anything that makes sense to you. Are there questions?
On the ones that doesn't give us the number and the angle, but the other angles are 30 and 90, can we assume the last angle is 60?
Yes, because we do know they add up to 180. Anything else? Okay. So I wanted to give you guys time to work